Today's daf is Yevamos daf Yud Gimel, and we are 6 lines from the top of daf Yud Beis Amud Beis Tonei Rav Bibi Kamei Rav Nachman. Today's daf is being learned Le'ilu Nishmas Shmaryo Yosef Chaim Ben Rav Yaakov Yisrael Zecher Tzadik V'Kodesh L'Vracha Hagoyin Hagadol Reb Chaim Kanievsky. So we're continuing here in the intense sugyas in the first parak of Masechtas Yevamos. And today's daf is going to focus on the seifa of the Mishnah on daf Beis. So if we go back to the first Mishnah in the Masechta, really the Mishnah was made up of 2 parts, a Reisha and a Seifa. The Reisha of the Mishnah discussed the basic halacha of erva, tsaras erva, and tsaras erva. The halacha is that if an erva falls the yibum, there's no chalitza. Not just the erva, but her tsara, not just her tsara, but her tsaras tsara. The Seifa of the Mishnah discussed what would be if Reuven and Shimon were brothers. Reuven was married to a woman that was an erva to Shimon. He had another wife as well, the quote-unquote tsaras erva, but before Reuven died, the marriage between Reuven and the erva was terminated. So, for example, Mesu, the erva died. Miyanu, she was a ketana and she did miyah. The skarshu, he divorced her. Nimtza islandess, she was an islandess. Point is that by the time Reuven had died, he was no longer married to the erva. He was only married to the tsaras erva. Said the Mishnah, in all those cases, tsaraseya mutaras. The tsaras erva is going to be mutar. And the reason is, as we'll see more in today's daf, because the halacha of tsaras erva is the halacha in hilchas yibum. Shaloi b'makei mitzvah, there's no such mitzias as tsaras erva. And the halacha of tsaras erva states that in the event that a man dies, leaves over no children, and there were 2 wives that fell a yibum, one was an erva to the yavam, the other one was not, then there's a parsha of tsaras erva. If, however, at the time that Reuven dies, he's no longer married to the erva, so that at the time of the nafila yibum, the tzara is not a tsaras erva, then you're not going to have a parsha of tsaras erva. At some point previously, Reuven was married to the erva, and at that time she was a tsaras erva. That's true, but that doesn't matter because tsaras erva is a halacha in Yevamos. So it's only once the Yevamos component kicks in that we start looking and determining whether this woman is an erva or a tsaras erva or a tsaras erva or a tsaras islandess or a tsaras saita, a tsaras machzik. We shall say all these things go into play at the time that the brother dies, at the time that there's an afilu yibum. The fact that at some point in the past this man was married to an erva plus this woman doesn't make her a tsaras erva. That was the seif of the Mishnah. Then the Mishnah went on and said keitzad on the ratio of the Mishnah. What's an example of an erva, tsaras erva? And then the Mishnah went on to give us examples, Ketzad, of the Seif of the Mishnah. Now, the Mishnah then added 1 line, which is where today's daf is going to begin. And that is, the Mishnah said that there were 15 noshim that were mentioned in the Mishnah. There were 15 arayas that were mentioned in the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, this is the Mishnah commenting on the Mishnah, that when we say the kulon imesu or miyanu or niskarshu or shenimtzu islandess, sorry, mutaros, that line, certain components of that line can't be referring to all 15 of the arayas. In fact, 2 of the things mentioned cannot refer back to 3 of the arayas. Sounds complicated, but it's really not. Okay, so the Mishnah is discussing where the marriage between Reuven and the erva was terminated before Reuven actually died. Mishnah gives 4 examples of how that would be possible. Mesu, the erva died. Miyanu, she did miyun. Niskarshu, she was divorced. Nimtzu islandess, she was found to be an islandess, Mekachtois. As a result, the marriage between Reuven and the erva was terminated. Then Reuven dies. Tzarasem Mutaris is no halacha of tsaras erva. So the Mishnah says, reading it inside, that the example of where the marriage between Reuven and the erva was terminated because she was found to be an islandess, or the example where the marriage between Reuven and the erva was terminated because she did miyun, cannot refer back to 3 of the 15 arayas, specifically chamoisai, eim chamoisai, and eim chamav. And the reason simply is because an islandess is a woman that can't have a child. Now, how is it possible then that this islandess would be Shimon's mother-in-law? If the islandess is a mother-in-law, then by definition she had a child. And if she's an islandess, she can't have a child. Not just that, she can't be the mother-in-law's mother. She can't be the father-in-law's mother. So it's impossible to have a woman that's going to be at the same time a chamoisai, em chamoisai, or em chamav, and an islandess. So therefore, says the Mishnah, that even though the Mishnah said all 15 arayas, im meksu, im mianu, im neskarshu, im nimtzu islandess, and then Ruvain dies, dalachis, saris, and mudaris, obviously when we said nimtzu islandess, it's not referring back to chamoisai, em chamoisai, and em chamav. This is just a technicality, no major impact on Allah. It's just a mitzias thing. It can't be referring back to those three arayas because those three arayas cannot be islandess. Additionally, it's not possible for a chamoisai, an em chamoisai, and an em chamav to do miyun either. That's also not a possibility. Now the question is why not? And that's going to be the topic of the first part of today's daf. Now the Gemara is going to assume, walking into the sugya, that the reason probably is because who does miyun? A ktana. Only a ktana can do miyun. Miyun is a kula that Chazal gave the ktana that was married not by choice, but rather because one of her kroivim married her off. The whole kedushin was done midrabanan, and being that the whole kedushin was done midrabanan, the Rabbanan instituted a kula and said that if at some point she decides she's not interested, that's something she could do. Now, very important, she could only be mamay until she becomes a gedolah. Once she becomes a gedolah, Pashut, once she's bas mitzvah, at that point, she doesn't have the ability to be memayin anymore. So really, who could do miyun? Only a ktana could do miyun. Someone that's a gedolah can't do miyun. Now, if you're telling me that this woman is a chamoisoi, she's an em chamoisoi, an em chamav, that means she had a child. A ktana can't have a child. So it's not possible for a chamoisoi, em chamoisoi, and em chamav to do miyun. Why? Because by definition, it would mean that she's a mother, and if she's a ktana, she can't be a mother, simply because a ktana cannot have a child. So again, the Mishnah says that all 15 arayas are poitros saresem, but saresem and a chalitzim and ayibum. All 15 arayas in the event that the marriage was terminated before Ruvain died, the halacha is there'd be no parasha of tzara azerv. The Mishnah gave 4 examples of how that marriage might have been terminated. The erva died, the erva did miyun, the erva was divorced, or the erva was found to be an ilus, and as a result, the marriage was deemed to be a mekach tois. 2 of the 4 examples only play out for 12 of the arayas, because it's not possible for Em Chamoisai and Em Chamav to be Nimtza islandess, because by definition, if she's a shviger, she's a mother, she cannot be an islandess. And it's also not possible for a Chamoisai, Em Chamoisai, Em Chamav to do miyun. And again, the Gemara thinks the reason is because only a ktana can do miyun, and a ktana can't have a child. If she can't have a child, she can't be a Chamoisai, she can't be an Em Chamoisai, she can't be Em Chamav. Now, the other 12 arayas work for 4. So the 4 examples that we have, 2 of them work for 15. The other 2 are only going to work for 12. It's a technicality, but the Gemara sees in this technicality a very big chiddush, and that is that a ktana cannot have a child, and that is going to be the topic of the first part of the Gemara. Now, the Gemara is going to begin with a classic Memrim Chazal, which is something that's very much halacha l'maisa. There's chuvas from Chaim Oizer and Achiezer, chuvas from Kiva Eger, chuvas from Moshe and Igris Moshe that deal with this from a contemporary perspective. These are Gemaras that go into the sugyas of birth control, halachis related to Tashmish Amita, in kan mekoymei laharich, stating that Zoch the Gemara. Tani Rav Bibi kamed Rav Nachman. Rav Bibi said over the following price in the presence of Rav Nachman. He said, Sholish noshim nesham shois b'moich. There are 3 women that they're allowed to engage in Tashmish Amita with a moich, meaning they're allowed to have a moich ba'oisay makoy, even though you would have thought that maybe that should be a problem. Now, what would be the theoretical issue with Tashmish Amita with a moich? The answer is Hashchasa Zera, because there's an issue for a person to be Moisi Zera Levatolo. And even Derech Tashmish, the Gemara assumes that it could be in the event that this Zera is not going to have the ability to be moiled a child, so L'chura, the person's being Mashcha Zera. So if that's the case, maybe it's Aser to be Mishamish together with a moich. So Rav Bibi told Rav Nachman, he said, and the Brisa says that, yeah, ordinarily there's an Isser Tashmish Amita with a moich, but there are 3 women that are exceptions to the rule. Sholish Nashim Misham Shis B'moich. Who are these 3 women? A Ktana, Me'uberes, that's a pregnant woman, Umeinik, and a woman that's nursing. And he explained, Ketana, the reason the Ketana is not allowed to be Mishamash B'moich is Shemet is allowed to be Mishamash B'moich, Shemet Tesaber, because we're concerned if she's not going to use a moich, maybe she's going to get pregnant. And if she gets pregnant, her body might be too young to be able to make it through a pregnancy, the Shemet Thomas, and she may end up dying. So because of a sakana, we're matter this Ketana to be Mishamash B'moich. Me'uberes, a pregnant woman, Shemet Tasa Uboro Sandal, we're afraid that maybe she's going to get pregnant again. That's what Rashi learns the Gemara. Taisa says no such thing. A pregnant woman can't get pregnant a second time. But the point is that could create a sakana. So that reason, Beres is also allowed to be mishamash b'moich. And finally, a woman that's nursing is allowed to be mishamash b'moich as well. Shemet tigma, but not the Yevamos, because we're afraid that if while she's nursing, she's going to get pregnant, she may stop being able to nurse, which may affect her child. The bottom line is the Mishnah says ordinarily it's also for a woman to be mishamash b'moich, stating that sholish nashim b'shamshis b'moich tana me'uberes u'meinika. Now we need katan. That's the sugya that we're discussing. So it says the Brisa continuing. What's a ketana that's lebi mishamish b'moich? The bas yud aleph shana b'yoyim echad, Amud Beis shana b'yoyim echad. It's a girl that's between the age of 11 and 12. Meaning once she's 12, she's a gedolah already. So when is she lebi mishamish b'moich? When she's 11. Pachas mikan. If she's younger than 11, v'yesser al kain, or she's older than 12, mishameshes kedarka v'yileches, then she's not lebi mishamish b'moich. Divrei Rameh. Chachamim learn. The Chachamim say achazu v'achazu mishameshes kedarka v'yileches. That no, Yehuda. But the Chachamim argue with Rameir, and the Chachamim say that every single ketana is allowed to be mishamish kedarka, meaning she's not mishamish b'moich. Isn't there a sakana? What did we say? Shemet tesaber v'shemet tamus min hashamayim yirachamu. No, you should have a tachin, and you should assume that everything's going to work out. Mishum shenemar, because there's an idea. Shomer p'sayim Hashem. Kadosh Baruch Hu watches the p'sayim, people that can't watch themselves. Kadosh Baruch Hu gives you a special shmira. I think that this ketana, she's married, and as a result, this dine oina dine tashmish amita, she is in a state of sakana. If she becomes muberes, you shouldn't worry about it. That's not a reason to be mishamish b'moich. She becomes pregnant, everything's going to be fine. She has a special shmir. What do you see from this whole discussion? What do you see from this well-known brisa of sholish noshim mishamshis b'moich kitana? What do you see from the fact that the Gemara said that what's the problem with a ketana being mishamish kedarka? Why is she allowed to be mishamish b'moich? It's shemotis aber v'shemotomos. Mid comes up the Gemara shemotis aber v'shemotomos. Michlal the ketana the mi'aber v'loy meso. What was the lashon of the Gemara? Shemotis aber. Maybe she's going to get pregnant, and if she gets pregnant, shemotomos. Maybe she's going to die. You know what it sounds like? It sounds like a ketana could become pregnant for sure. I mean that's obvious because otherwise, what's a sakana? So for sure she could become pregnant, and it's also possible that after she becomes pregnant, she's not going to die. It's only Shema Tesaber v'Shema Tamos. But if it's Shema Tamos, then implied from that is Shema Loy Tamos. Dr. Gemara, you see that it's possible for a ketana to have a child. In Cain, Dr. Gemara, if that's the case, that means it's possible to have a woman that's a mother-in-law, and the woman will be able to do miyun. Why? Because what would be the problem with a mother-in-law being able to do miyun? Who does miyun? The ketana. A ketana, in order to be a mother-in-law, would have to be a mother. A ketana can't be the mother of a child. But if you see that really a ketana could be a mother, what was the lashon of Chazal? Shema tesaber v'shema tamos. So that means it's possible to have a chamois b'meres. Time we learned in our Mishnah. You see clearly that it's not possible to say by chamois. Why is it not possible to have chamois b'meres? Because it's impossible for a ketana to have a child. You see that the only reason we allow the ketana to be mishamish b'moich is because of a chashash. Shema tesaber v'shema tomos. It sounds like it's not vaday tomos, it's only shema tomos. Shema tomos means shema loy tomos. If it's shema loy tomos, then it's possible she could have a child, she could have a child, she could be a chamois, she could be a chamois. Why did the Mishnah say that loy motzino? It's not possible to have a chamois and mamenes, and therefore when the Mishnah says v'kulan miyanu, it's not referring to three of the arayas, it's not referring to chamois and em chamav. L'chura, it could very much be referring to chamois. That's the Gemara's kasha. And for the Gemara, emo ayir. But edit the brayso, a very, very subtle edit. And that is, don't say Shema Tesaber v'Shema Tamos, but rather Shema Tesaber v'Tamos. What the Brisa meant to say was the reason that Ketana is allowed to be Mishamish B'moich is not because maybe she's going to get pregnant, and if she gets pregnant, maybe she's going to die. Chazal held it's a chazaka, it's B'teres Vata, that if Ketana is going to get pregnant, she will die. And that's why L'shitosayu Chazal said in our Mishnah that it's not possible to have a chamois and mamenes, because if she's doing miyun, that means she's a ketana, and if she's a ketana, she can't be a chamoisa. Because it's not Shema Tesaber v'Shema Tamos, it's Shema Tesaber v'Tamos. And again, it doesn't change the substance of everything that we just said. Shema Tesaber v'Shema Tamos, that would be a reason she should be able to be Meshamash B'moich. And Shema Tesaber v'Tamos would also be a reason she should be able to be Meshamash B'moich. Where it plays an afkamina is in the Metzios. Could it kind of have a child or could she not have a child? If it's Shema Tesaber v'Shema Tamos, it sounds like Shema Tamos, but also Shema Lei Tamos. She could have a child. If it's Shema Tesaber Vid Tamos, that means it sounds like she cannot have a child. Our Mishnah is Mavur, she can't have a child. That's the case. After Gemara, just change the girsa to Shema Tesaber Vid Tamos, and everything is going to be okay. And the Gemara says, in fact, Rabbi Bar said it before. She said, Gvul Yeshla. He said, a Ketana has a Gvul as it relates to becoming pregnant and surviving pregnancy. Before this man, before she turns 11, that was Rameir's Shita, she can't become pregnant at all. And that's where Rameir holds that even a Ketana cannot be Meshamish B'moich until she turns 11. The reason is because she's not going to get pregnant anyway. During the year between 11 and 12, she becomes pregnant, she's going to die. The Ubra Mace, and the Ubra is going to die. Once she turns 12, she'll live, and her child is going to live as well. But what did Rabbi Balivoy say? This one line, he Mesa, the Ubra Mace, meaning she's going to die, the Ubra is going to die. It's not Shema. He Mesa. She's going to die if she becomes pregnant. The point is, it's not possible for Ketana to have a child. If you change the girsa from Shema Tesaber v'Shema Tamos to Shema Tesaber v'Tamos, then everything is good. Is that true? Is it true that a Ketana cannot have a child? Is it true it's Shema Tesaber v'Tamos? I'll ask you a kash. Rabbi Bar Shmuel had a brisa, and the brisa said the halacha of the Mishnah, where the Mishnah says v'kulan, if the marriage between one of the arayos was terminated before Ruvain died, so the halacha is there's no parsha of tzaras erva, and then the Brisa said what the Mishnah said, meaning kulan and mesu and iskarshu and miyanu and nimtzu aylanis, and said what the Mishnah said, that miyanu or nimtzu aylanis doesn't work for all the cases, but it said it with a slightly different lashon than the Mishnah said. The Brisa said, and the reason is shekfar yoldu, because they already had a child. And the Gemara is bothered with a very, very subtle diak. It's mashma that the reason that the chamoise, the im chamoise and im chamav can't do mion is because they already had a child. And as if to say, once a girl has a child, at that point she can't do mion anymore. Is that the punchline? The punchline is that if she had a child, by definition she's a gedolah, and a gedolah can't do mion. Again, very subtle. So why did the Brisa say that the reason she can't do mion is because she had a child? Really what the Brisa should be saying is the reason she can't do mion is because she's a gedolah. Now, how do you know she's a gedolah? Because she had a child. But the reason she can't do mion is not because she had a child. The reason she can't do mion is because she's a gedolah. You know what it's mashma? It's mashma that a ketana could have a child. Narvas, if a ketana has a child, a ketana can't do mion. It's a halacha in hilchas mion, not a halacha in hilchas mitzios of whether a ketana can have a child or can't have a child. So the Gemara asks that we're saying that a ketana can't be a chamoisai. Why? Because a ketana can't have a child. It's not possible. And the right girsa in Rameir of Sholosh Nashim V'Shamshus B'moich, it's not Shema Tesaber V'Shema Tamos, it's Shema Tesaber V'Tamos. Frank the Gemara from Rabbi Bar Shmuel's Brisa, from his nusach that he had in the Mishnah, right? The Brisas very often had different nuschayos than the Mishnah. Different Brisas sometimes had different nuschayos from themselves. But from that girsa of Shekfar Yoldu, it sounds a little different than the way we're coming out in our sugya. And that's the Gemara's Kasha Eini. Meaning Eini is, up until this point, we're saying, the reason you can't have a Chamois and Mamenes is because Mion's only a Ketana. Ketana can't have a child. It's not mashma that way. It's mashma really a Ketana could have a child from this brisa. It's mashma, however, that the Ketana can't do Mion precisely because she had the child. Again, we're not arguing and debating the halacha. We're debating the Metzias now. Could a Ketana have a child or Ketana not have a child? So the Gemara comes out, you're right. Let's go back to Rameir's Girsa, Sholosh Nashim V'Shamshus B'moich. The right Girsa is Shema Tesaber V'Shema Tamos, which means Shema Loi Tamos, which means that a Ketana really can have a child. If a Ketana can have a child, so what did the Mishnah mean when it said, it meant exactly what Rabbi Bar Shmuel's Brisa said. The reason she can't do mion is shekfar yoldu. Let's see it inside. Rav Safra said, bonim hareim kisimonim. Because a Ketana becomes a gedolah when when she brings two Cyrus, right? This is a very big misconception which plays itself out when you're in Masechtas Nida and different areas in Halacha. But a boy becomes bar mitzvah not when he turns 13, when he brings two Cyrus. A Ketana becomes bas mitzvah not when she turns 12, when she brings two Cyrus. The only reason we attribute bar mitzvah to 13 and bas mitzvah to 12 is because Rava said in Masechtas Nida that there's a chazaka, that when a boy turns 13, he probably brought two Cyrus. And when a girl turns 12, she probably brought two Cyrus. But it's all based on a chazaka. If we would know for sure that the boy doesn't have two Cyrus, he wouldn't be bar mitzvah. If we would know for sure that a girl doesn't have two Cyrus, she wouldn't be bas mitzvah. There's a very famous Yam Shel Shloimo in Perek Meruba, Masechtas Bava Kama, with the Yam Shel Shloimo. He talks about Sudas bar mitzvah, and he says, "In lecha Sudas mitzvah gedola mizu." It's the most chashuv Suda in the world. From in the pantheon of Sudas mitzvahs, there's no Sudas mitzvah like a Sudas bar mitzvah. Kiyadua. But then he says he just has one problem. What he doesn't understand, and we spoke about this in Masechtas Nida, is that we make a Sudas bar mitzvah when a boy turns 13. He says, really, when a boy turns 13, you don't know for sure he's bar mitzvah. It's only based on a chazakah. So we should go then and we should celebrate. Famous kasha from the Yam Shel Shloimo. But the point is that really, when does a person become a gadol? Zachar oy nekeva. It's when they bring Cyrus. Cyrus is the siman of gadlus. Said Rav Safra Chiddush. Just like shtei Cyrus makes a ketana gedola, so too banim would make a ketana gedola. So banim hareihen kisimanim. So the point is, la'olam a ketana could have a child. But even though a ketana could have a child, once a ketana has a child, she can't do miyun anymore. And the reason is because banim is kisimanim. And just like if she was a gedola, she wouldn't be able to do miyun. So too, if she has banim, the banim is going to make her into a gedola from the standpoint of miyun anyways. And therefore, the halach is going to be, she won't be able to do miyun. And that's why, because if she's a chamoisa, she had a child. If she had a child, that means banim harein kisimanim. And at that point, she can't do miyun anymore. Istam, some say that banim is not kisimanim, but banim is adifim simanim. Banim is even better than simanim. Meaning, if a woman has banim, it's more of a siman than shtei Cyrus. What does that mean? What does it mean more than shtei Cyrus? The Rabbi Yehuda, the Chiddush is even Rabbi Yehuda Damar who holds achiyar b'shacher. Even though Rabbi Yehuda holds that a girl is allowed to do miyun even after she brings shtei Cyrus, until it's yarba shachar, until she has a lot of Cyrus. So up until that point, Allah, she's still allowed to do miyun. But banim later, he doesn't agree that banim is adifim simanim. It's better than two Cyrus, but rather it's like actually yarba shachar, and therefore the Allah is going to be even she won't be able to do miyun. But the point is, what we're saying right now is that lo'olam a ketana could have a child. And Afal Piki, the Mishnah says, the reason is because if she's a chamoisa, by definition, it means she had a child. If she had a child, bonim harein kisimanim, bonim adifim simanim, and once she brings simanim, she can't do mean anymore. So therefore, she won't be able to do mean either. Rav Zvid said a similar teretz. He said, "Ein bonim below simanim." Not bonim hareihin kisimanim, meaning the bonim themselves are not the hefts of the simanim. The bonim is not what makes her into a gdoila that says she can't do mean anymore, but rather the bonim is a siman that there are simanim. Ein bonim below simanim. If she didn't have simanim, she would not be able to have had bonim. The fact that she was able to have children is a raya that she had simanim. Now, just to be clear, it's not a raya that she's 12. Maybe she's younger than 12. But Rav Zvid is of the opinion, Zakir Ashi, that even a ketana that is maybe shtei Cyrus is considered a gdoila. So if ein bonim below simanim, that would mean that for sure she had shtei Cyrus. If she had shtei Cyrus, she would be a gdoila. And it's for that reason we would treat her as a gdoila. Says the Gemara b'Niftag. So why are we then just assuming, oh, she had bonim, she probably had simanim? Let's just be baidik. Let's see, does she have simanim? Does she not have simanim? Why are we making assumptions? Meaning, really, banim in and of itself would not be a reason, says Rav Zvid, to say that the woman can't do miyun. It's just that ein banim below simanim. If she has banim, then by definition she had simanim, and it's the simanim, it's the shtei Cyrus that are saying that she can't do. So the Gemara. So why are you relying on a chazaka? It's something that could be verified. So we're concerned that maybe she had shtei Cyrus and the Cyrus fell out, and it's for that reason that being baidik is not really going to help us. The banim is a chazaka that there was simanim, and we rely on that chazaka. That's all good according to Nandam that holds that chayish that a woman might have had Cyrus and the Cyrus fell out. This is again a discussion in Masechtas Nida. According to Nandam that says whenever chayish for something like this, so just check and like this, we'll know whether there's Cyrus or not Cyrus. And if there's no Cyrus, that means for sure she's a ketana because there's no chashash shemanashu. So why are we relying on ein banim b'lo simanim? It's something that's verifiable. Let's be baidik. Even according to Manama that holds that we're not chayish ordinarily, that maybe the Cyrus fell out. Here we're talking about a Ketana that had a child. A Ketana that had a child, she went through Tsar Leda, she went through childbirth, and therefore it's very possible that the Tsar, the pain of the Leda, caused the Cyrus to fall out. And for that reason, checking in of itself is not going to be okay. What then is the reason that we assume she's a Gedolah? It's because ein banim b'lo simanim. So just to recap, the Gemara that we just learned, in the Mishnah was mavur that it's not possible for chamoisai, ein chamoisai, the ein chamav to do miyun. Why was that negated? The Mishnah, because the Mishnah was discussing a case where you had a woman that was a tzaras erva, but by the time she fell a yibum, she was no longer a tzaras erva. The reason is because the marriage between the Achames, Ruvain, and the Erva had been terminated. The Mishnah gave a few examples of how that could have happened. Either she died, or she was divorced, or she did Mion, or she was an Nimtza Islandess. And the Mishnah said that as it relates to Mion and Nimtza Islandess, it's impossible for that to be true for all 15 Arayas that the Mishnah is talking about, because 3 of the Arayas can never do Mion. 3 of the Arayas can't be Nimtza Islandess. Which Arayas? They can't be Nimtza Islandess, because an Islandess by definition had a child. And I by definition can't have a child, and the chamoisa by definition had a child. They also can't do miyah. Why? Because the assumption is that a mother is already past the stage where she should be able to do miyah. And what comes out, the maskanos haGemara, is that there's 2 mahalchim why that would be the case. One mahalach is because banim harein kesimanim. The moment she has a child, she becomes a gedolah. And if that's the case, even if she's a ketana, it doesn't matter what her birth certificate says. She automatically gets a din of a gedolah, and a gedolah can't do miyun. So if a gedolah can't do miyun, so it's for that reason it's not possible chamoisa the em chamav to do miyun. Why? Because it doesn't matter how old she is. What do you mean? I thought a ketana could do miyun. Yeah, but once she has banim, at that point they constitute simanim. It's as if she had shtei cyrus, and therefore the halach is she's going to be a gedolah. The second mahalach in the Gemara was not that banim in and of itself is a siba for the girl to be a gedolah, but it's a siman. Ein banim b'lo simanim. The fact that she had children, that's a raya. She must have had simanim. And maybe we were baidik and there were no simanim. That maybe the simanim fell out. But the point is we assume that once she has a child, at that point she's a gedolah. Either the banim make her a gedolah, or the banim are a raya that she is a gedolah. And again, just to emphasize, highlight this nuance. 2 mahalchim in the Gemara. Banim hareim kisimanim / banim adifim nisimanim. That's one mahalch. Or ein banim b'lo simanim. What's the difference? Are the banim a siba for her being treated as a gedolah, or is it just a siman that she's a gedolah? Siba means the banim are the reason she's a gedolah. Siman means the banim are not the reason she's a gedolah. That's just the raya that she's a gedolah. Either way, Zok the Gemara Vayik. So referring back to the Mishnah discussed the halacha that an erva that falls liyibum is patam even chalitza. Not just the erva, even the tzaras erva, not just the tzaras erva, but even the tzaras erva. How do you know that a tzaras erva is pater? Rashi, 3 words. The tzaras p'tura. The Gemara wants to know what the makar is that a tzaras erva is pater. Rabbi Yehuda said the Amakra. The pasuk says litzrar. It says litzrar. This is the makar to tzaras erva, and it could have said lotzor. From the fact that it says in the Torah litzrar, haTorah rips tzaras erva. The Torah is coming to tell me that not only is there a halach of tzaras erva, but there's a halach of tzaras erva as well. If this drasha sounds familiar, it's because this is, of course, the drasha in the grace of Reid that we learned together in Daf Gimel Amud Beis. The Gemara is really just, for whatever reason, picking on tzaras erva minani mili, and the Gemara just quoted an excerpt from the Reid. Rav Ashi said a different teretz. Rav Ashi said, you want to know what the makar to tzaras erva is? Svarah. So it's a svara. Sorry, my time asiro. Why is it tzaras erva aser? Because she's the tzara of the erva. No, if that's the case, tzara nabi b'makom erva kaima. So it comes out that the tzara of the tzaras erva is also the makom erva. Meaning, Rav Ashi said, you need a pasuk litzar to tell me that tzaras erva is aser. Once I know tzaras erva is aser, it's a svara that a tzaras erva is aser. Because what's a tzaras erva? She's the tzara of an erva. No, the tzaras erva is also the tzara of an erva. Why? Because a tzaras erva doesn't fall yibum. So if a tzaras erva doesn't fall yibum, pashab shah, she's now an Eishes shaloi b'makom mitzvah. There's no heter on the Eishes. So it comes out that the tzaras erva is really a tzaras erva. So I need litzrar, the extra reish, to teach me the halacha of tzaras erva. Once I know tzaras erva, I know tzaras erva. Now Rav Ashi's line sounds eerily similar to Rab Kiva Eger's kasha, which is a problem. We're going to get to this in the Reid. So referring back to the Mishnah said in Mesuheim v'chut. So again, the Mishnah had a reisha and a seif. The reisha of the Mishnah was the halacha of erva tzaras erva. The seif of the Mishnah was in the event that Reuven was married to an erva and another wife, the tzaras erva, and then the marriage between Reuven and the erva was terminated before he died. The halacha is, there's no din tzaras erva. This tzara was once a tzaras erva. It's true she was once a tzaras erva, but she was a tzaras erva before the nefilah liyibum. We don't care about that. As long as she's not a tzaras erva at the time of the nefilah liyibum, that in of itself is going to be enough that she should not be treated as a tzaras erva. So zok the Gemara, vafilu kines ulubasayv girish. For the Mishnah, it sounds like Mishnah just picking the case of Gerishim. Let's pick that case where Reuven was married to Shimon's erva and to another woman, the tzaras erva. Then Reuven divorced, let's just pick that case, the erva, so that he was only married to the tzaras erva, and then he died. It sounds like from the Mishnah, very, very clearly, that the tzaras erva won't be a tzaras erva. Why? Because at the time that Reuven died, she wasn't a tzaras erva. I think they were married together at the same time. There was a time they were married 10 years together. Doesn't matter. Efilu kines, right? Just read the words. Even if Reuven was married to the erva and the tzaras erva, ula b'soif giresh, and then after he was married to both of them at the same time, he divorced the erva. Still, as long as he's not married to both of them at the time he dies, that's going to be enough that the tzaras erva should not be treated as a tzaras erva. Feit Gemara kasha v'raminu from a Mishnah that's later in Perek Arba'ach. What does the Mishnah say? It's a classic Arba'achin case. Gimel Achin, there were three brothers. Two of the brothers were married to two sisters. And one of them was married to a nachris. One of them was married to not someone that was one of the sisters. So Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven and Shimon are married to two sisters. Levi is married to a nachris. One of the balei achayos, one of the brothers that were married to the sisters, divorced his wife. Let's call him Shimon. Shimon divorces his wife. And then the brother that was married to not one of the sisters, Levi, died. And then Shimon, the one who had divorced his wife, married Levi's Yevamos, and then Shimon died and left over no children. So what happened? First, Levi died, then Shimon died. Shimon had been married to Reuven's wife's sister. He divorced her. Then Levi died. After Levi died, Shimon did Yibum with Eishes Levi. Then Shimon died, so that Eishes Levi is falling the Yibum to Reuven since Sveitimah. Now, at this point, she's a regular Yavam. But there is a tzad tzaras erva. The reason is a tzad tzaras erva because there was a time in history that Shimon was married to Reuven's wife's sister. Reuven's wife's sister is an achos isha. So there could have been a havamina, ben benoishal havamina, that maybe Eishes Levi, who's now Eishes Shimon, should be also to Reuven, midin tzaras erva. But it's mavur in the Mishnah that she's not. The reason she's not is because at the time that Shimon died, he had already divorced the achos isha of Reuven. And it's for that reason, she's not a tzaras achos isha, she's not a tzaras erva, it's not going to be a problem. And the Mishnah says, Zu Isha Amru. This is what the Mishnah meant. Where on Amud Beis, Shemeso in this Garshu, sorry, saying Mutaras, that in the event you have a case of tzaras erva, but the erva died before the brother died, or the erva was divorced before the brother died, the halach is the tzara is going to be mutar. So the Gemara makes a not such subtle diak. What was the case? Time of the giresh v'achakach kines. The case was where first Shimon divorced his wife, who was Reuven's wife's sister, and then he was miyabim Eishes Levi. Then we say that Eishes Levi is not a tzaras achos isha. Avol kines v'achakach giresh. But what would be if Shimon would have been miyabim Eishes Levi before he divorced his wife, then he would have divorced his wife? Why? It sounds like then when Shimon dies, even though he had already divorced his wife, but the wife would have been a tzaras erva. And the reason it should be a tzaras erva because he was married to the two of them at the same time. So the Gemara asks a bon kasha. The kasha is that In our Mishnah on that base, it sounds like, when is a tsaras erva not a tsaras erva? As long as she's not a tsaras erva at the time that the brother dies. As between the way the Mishnah and Arba Achim understands this halacha. So the Gemara says, Rav Yirmi said, Tavra, Shana Zu, Shana Zu. You have to say that the Tana of the Mishnah Daf Beis is not the Tana of the Mishnah, the Kaman and Arba Achim, meaning it's actually Machloikis. You're right. Meaning there was a Messiah, Chazal said that there's a concept that the Kulon and Mesu and Niskarshu and Miyanu, Oichalimsu Islanders, that's enough to say it's Arasayim Mutaris. And there was actually two opinions in the Tanam how this halacha plays out. The Tana of the Mishnah Daf Beis understood that as long as they're not Saras Erb at the time of the death of Reuben, as long as in the Nefilim, even they weren't Saras Erb, even though they were married at the same time, nobody cares about that. What we care about is what Putzach B'Shas Yibum. As long as B'Shas Yibum, he wasn't married to both of them at the same time, that's giving enough to say Arasayim Mutaris. The Tana of the Mishnah and Arba Achim knows that no. As long as they're married at the same time, even though at the time that the brother dies and she falls Yibum, she's no longer Tzaras Erba, that would be enough to say that she has a din of a Tzaras Erba. What's the machlokes? The Gemara puts some very lomdisha terminology to this machlokes. Hain Tana Sovar, the Tana of our Mishnah holds Misa Mapelas, that all the Dinei Yibum Machal at the time that the brother dies. Reuben and Shimon are brothers. Umeis, Reuven dies, that's when Yibum goes into effect. So right now is where we have to take a snapshot. Was tut sich in der Welt? It's there. What's going on in the world right now? She's a tzaras ever right now. Done. Let's start. There's no yibum. There's no chalitza. Right now, she's not a tzaras ever. Then there's gonna be yibum and chalitza. 3 years. I don't care about 3 years ago. When is Yevamos in effect? Misa mapelas. It's the misa of the brother that makes everything happen, and that's what we need to look at. The Haitana Sava, whereas the Tana of the Mishnah Arba Achim holds Nesuin Harishonim Apirim. He holds a very big chiddush. He holds that the Dine Yibum start going into effect when the husband and wife are standing under the chuppah. At that point already, that's when the dinim of Yibum happen. So if that's the case, if at any point during his marriage, he's married to an erva and a tzaras erva, litzur goes into effect. To what extent? So that when he dies, if he dies, and leaves over no children, at that point, the Allah is going to be, the tzara is going to be considered a tzaras erva. So the Gemara says, Enochinami, Amr Yirmiyah, Tavra, Misha, Shana Zu, Shana Zu. It's good diak. It's machloikis between the Tana of the Mishnah Daf Beis and the Tana of the Mishnah in Perek Arba Achim. And the machloikis isn't just a technical machloikis. It's a machloikis that's oimed berumay shaloylam. Is it nesuin harishonim apilim or is it misa mapelas? Rava said no. Loylam chatana, who I disagreed. No, it's all one Tana. It's one Tana. Everybody holds misa mapelas. Everybody holds that when you look at Yibum, so you take a snapshot. It's what happened at the time of the misa. What? When the husband and wife get married, Dine Yibum Machal? Why would you say that? So we have a steerer. From our Mishnah, it's mashma that as long as she's not a tzaras erva at the time of the misa, that's going to be enough. From the Mishnah later, it's mashma that even if she was a tzaras erva somewhere along the way, that's going to be okay. So the Gemara says, Zu ve'ein tzarech loy marzu. That the reason the Mishnah mentioned that case was not because it had to. In fact, it's a lesser chiddush than what the Mishnah already said on that base. But the Tana of the Mishnah does that sometimes. Sometimes the Tana of the Mishnah says things it didn't have to say. Meaning, once you see on that base that if she's not a tzaras erva at the time of the misa, even if she was a tzaras erva during some time of the marriage, that's enough for her not to be able to pater her tzara. Then certainly if she wasn't a tzaras erva during marriage, like the case where Shimon divorced the achris isha and then he married the tzara, for sure she won't be considered a tzaras erva. And if that's the case, the Mishnah really didn't have to say it. Why did the Mishnah say it? Because the Mishnah sometimes says things it doesn't have to say. In fact, there's a category of things called zu. I'll tell you this. The ain't tzarech loy mazu. And now I'm going to tell you something I don't have to tell you. Now, why would we do that? That's something we had actually talked about in the past. But there is a concept of a zu, the ain't tzarech loy mazu. And Rava said, I don't think this is a machlokes. I'm not looking to take this diak and create two Yevamos based on this diak. To me, this is just an example of a zu, the ain't tzarech loy mazu. And if that's the case, became game weiter. So we're up to the very, very last line of the first Mishnah in the Masechta. The Mishnah said, quote, V'chol ha'yechol l'mayim, v'loy miyana, tzarasa chayletzes, v'loy mesyavemes. So we learned the Mishnah the first time, it was a little bit harder. Now, 12 dafim later, we understand it hopefully a little bit better, and that is the Mishnah is talking about Reuven and Shimon were brothers. Reuven died, he left over no children, he left over 2 wives. One of the wives was an Erva to Shimon, the other one was not an Erva to Shimon. The Erva is the Erva, and the other wife is the Tzaras Erva. We know what the halacha of an Erva is, we know what the halacha of a Tzaras Erva was. The case of the Mishnah is where the Erva was married to Reuven, but only married midrabanan. Because she was married midrabanan, she was a yechola l'ma'in. If she wanted to do miyun, she could have done miyun. So Reuven is married again to 2 wives, the Erva and the Tzaras Erva. The Erva he's married to midrabanan. The Tzaras Erva he's married to midayrais. So here's the question: the Tzaras Erva, as it relates to Shimon, is she a Tzaras Erva or is she not a Tzaras Erva? So you say, of course, she's a Tzaras Erva. No, it's not so pasha. It's only midrabanan that she's a Tzaras Erva. Because midrabanan, 2 women fell a yibum. The Kitana, the Yechola L'ma'eh, and the Tzaras Erva. But midayraisa, only 1 woman fell a yibum. Because midayraisa was never married to the Kitana. He was never married to the Erva. If that's the case, the Tzaras Erva is the one Yevama. And if she's the one Yevama, there's a Zika, there's a regular Nefila L'yibum. So what do you have? You have a situation where midrabanan, the tzara is a tzaras erva, but midayraisa, she's not a tzaras erva. So what's the halacha? It's easy. Every single time we're going to encounter something like this in Yevamos, the resolution is always going to be the same. You can't do yibum because midrabanan she's a tzaras erva. So al zeh nemar litzra, and to be potable klum, for her to just be a woman that's allowed to marry anyone that she wants. Midayraisa she's Yevama. Midayraisa loisia Eishes ameisachutza lishzar. So what do? You do chalitza. Chalitza v'loimis Yevamos. Chalitza doesn't violate any surim. As a result, you're not doing anything bad. So you're not violating the issa litzra midrabanan. And at the same time, once she gets chalitza, so midayraisa, she's no longer shemeres yavam. She is now going to be able to marry anybody that she wants. So again, the Mishnah said that in the event that a katana, that's an erfa, and a gedola that's a tzaras erva falls liyibum, the halach is chayletzes v'loy misyabem. Straight to Gemara, I have a better answer. V'tamayin hashta v'tisyabem. Why can't the ketana just do miyun right now? And if she's going to do miyun right now, it's going to be oiker her nesuin l'mafrei. If it's going to be oiker her nesuin l'mafrei, it's going to come out she never fell liyibum. If she never fell a yibum, only the tzara fell a yibum. If only the tzara fell a yibum, then the churi should be able to do yibum. It's afraid to Gemara. Why are we even stuck here? Right? It feels like we're boxed in. We don't know what to do. Therefore, we do what we always do in Yevamos when we're boxed in. Afraid to Gemara. It's not true. Here there's an eitzah. The eitzah is the ketana could do miyot. Let her be mamayin now, and if she's going to be mamayin now, it'll be oiker her nesuin lemafreya. And if that's the case, all there is a tzaras erva, without any erva, from midrabanan, and she should be able to do yibum. And of course, after learning yesterday's daf, sort of. So we understand this a little bit better because we saw in yesterday's daf that a ketana could do miyun even after her husband dies. She could be mamayin to the yavam. So afraid the Gemara, let her be mamayin to the yavam. And if that's the case, it'll be oiker her nesuin mafreya. It'll come out she never fell a yibum. Only the tzara fell a yibum. And if that's the case, mitzvah yabim. So Rabbi Shaya, is this a riot? Rabbi Shaya actually said you can't do miyun to a yavam. If the yavam does maimer, then she could do miyun on the maimer. But if the yavam never did maimer, then she can't do miyun. You can't do miyun on zika. We're not going to go down this road now. But the point is this a raya that a yavama cannot do miyun? This is the Gemara's kash. The Gemara says like, but even I'll tell you, a katana could do miyun to a yavama. A yavama can do miyun. In our Mishnah, it's different because tzaras erva shani. Over here, the katana is an erva, which makes the tzara a tzaras erva. And if you're going to allow the yavam to be miyabim the tzaras erva because of the fact that the erva did miyun, we're going down a slippery slope. The Tani Rami Bar Yecheskel taught us. When did he teach this to us? Yesterday. If the ketana does miyun to her husband, so the halach is mutaris la'aviv. The ketana is allowed to marry the husband's father. Even though ordinarily a girl can never marry her husband's father, that's kalasai. But miyun is oiked in a sulam afreya. It comes out they were never married, so she was never kalasai. But if the ketana didn't miyun on the yavam, which is something she could do, asur la'aviv, the halacha she will not be able to marry his father. Why? Alma, you see from me, mishas nefilim nirske kalasai. Because once it's in a filu le'yivam, at that point, The optics are not good. It looks like the marriage was a real marriage. And even though it's true she could do miyun, and miyun could be, but it looks like the miyun never happened. It looks like that she actually fell with Yibum. So although it's not a real kalasi, but it looks like it's kalasi. Over here, if she's going to do miyun, it's still going to not look good. And if the Yavam is going to be miyabim the tzara based on the miyun of the Ketana, it's going to look like he's being miyabim the tzara serva, which of course is a terrible, terrible thing. It's an Eishes mitzvah, litzra, and for that reason, zok the Gemara, it's not going to be okay. So you're right, the Mishnah says, maybe la'olam, kol she'yachayla l'mayin, v'loy miyana, there would be an eitzah to be miyabim the tzara serva. Why let him do yibum to the Yavam? The problem is, it's only a derabanan, because at the end of the day, her doing miyun is now going to allow you to be miyabim the tzara serva. Looks like there's a yibum taking place with a tzara serva, which is something that's ordinarily also, even though in this case it's mutter, because in this case, I'm afraid she's not a tzara serva anymore, still it's not going to be okay. So really, a ketana could be mamayin to a yavam. She could. Ordinarily, it's something she could do. But to do miyun to a yavam, which will result in now there being a yibum to a tzara serva, that's not something that's okay. We can take a very, very big exhale right now before we continue to go weiter, as this concludes the Gemara's discussion of the first Mishnah Masechtas Yevamos. It really ends a chapter in Yevamos. Now, believe it or not, as we mentioned yesterday, the next several dafim is going to be a breather, pun intended. It's going to be a lot lighter. We're going to get into some Divrei Agada related to B'Shan B'Sil, obviously all from the perspective of Yevamos. So we're not being Mesiach Das from Yevama Yavayalel. But at the same time, it's definitely a little bit lighter. Zok the Mishnah. So the first Mishnah of the Masechta discussed 15 arayas, that if they fall Yibum, Poitros Sarah saying, the Tzara Sarah saying, in a Chalitza, in a Yibum, at Soifa. Zok the Mishnah. We're familiar with this Mishnah already. There are 6 arayas that are, quote, more chamor than the 15 arayas, nipnei, shenesuyas lachem. And it's because these 6 arayas cannot be married to the Yavam's brother. It's impossible. So therefore, tzara saying mutaros, their tzaros are going to be mutar. So let's just speak to that again, even though we've mentioned it so many times. The Mishnah mentioned 15 arayas that are poichas tzara saying, but tzara saying. Those 15 arayas are not the only 15 arayas in the Torah. What's unique about those 15 arayas is those are the only 15 examples of where it's possible that you can have a brother marry a woman that's an erva to his brother. That's only possible in 15 cases. And those are the 15 arayas in the Mishnah. There are a lot more than 15 arayas. But those are 15 examples where it's possible that Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Reuven was married to a woman that happens to be an erva to Shimon. The Mishnah now is going to mention 6 arayas, 6 women that are an erva to Shimon. But it's impossible for Reuven, his brother, to have been married to these arayas. And the reason is because just like these 6 women are arayas to Shimon, they'd be arayas to Shimon's brother Reuven. And Reuven can't marry an erva for 2 reasons. Number 1, because it's aser, and number 2, kedusha is not even teifus. The marriage wouldn't be a marriage because everybody holds that kedusha is not teifus by arayas. Arayas is a chavi krisis. If a child was born from a chavi krisis, the child's a mamzer. And as a result, it meets all the criteria for itfisas kedusha. So the Mishnah is saying that in the event that a man was married to a woman that was an erva to Shimon, and he was married to another woman as well, and he died, and the erva was one of these 6 arayas, the halacha Shimon would be allowed to marry that other woman. The quote-unquote tzara serva can't marry the erva, but he'd be able to marry the tzara serva. Why? Because by definition, if this story happened, that man that died was not Shimon's brother. Because it's not possible for the case to be in Shimon's brother, because Shimon's brother would never have been able to marry the erva. So obviously, it wasn't Shimon's brother. If it wasn't Shimon's brother, it's not Makom Yibum, because Yibum is only Kiyeshbu Achim Yachtav. So really what you have is a tzaras erva shloim b'makom mitzvah, and tzaras erva shloim b'makom mitzvah we know from learning the first parak of Yevamos. At this point is not a problem. So the Mishnah is just saying that there's 6 arayas that are chamures me'elu. We're using the word chamures loosely, but the punchline of the Mishnah is because these arayas by definition are married to acher. What does acher mean? Someone other than Shimon's brother, because it's not possible that these arayas should be married to Shimon's brother. Because just like there are arayas to Shimon, there are arayas to Shimon's brother. It's for that reason that tzara is a tzara serva shloim b'makom mitzvah. And what's the halacha of tzara serva shloim b'makom mitzvah? The next 2 words in the Mishnah, tzara is saying mutara, is gevaldik. That's the Mishnah. So the Mishnah, what are the examples? What are these 6 arayas? The following: Imai, Shimon's mother, the Eishes Aviv, Shimon's father's wife, v'achois aviv, Shimon's father's sister, achoisai me aviv, Shimon's paternal sister, the Eishes achi aviv, Shimon's father's brother's wife, the Eishes achiv me aviv, or Shimon's brother's wife, where Shimon's brother is his paternal brother, not his maternal brother. Either way, that actually helps us out a little bit with the Metzias, but it's very, very straightforward. All 6 of these arayas that are arayas to Shimon would also be arayas to Reuven. As a result, Reuven can't marry these women, and if that's the case, it's never going to be a makkah mitzvah. So the tzara is going to be a tzara sever shlebim makkah mitzvah, and the tzara sever shlebim makkah mitzvah is not a problem. Zok the Mishnah vayit. So the first sugi Masechtas Yevamos is the sugi of tzaras erva. Tzaras erva. This is Yevamos 101, right? This is the most basic halach in Yevamos. It certainly sounds like everybody holds of the halach of tzaras erva. Zok the Mishnah. No, in fact, half of Klal Yisrael. It was a mir of Klal Yisrael, not half. But there was a good percentage of Klal Yisrael that did not hold of the halacha of tzaras erva. They shami matir, not tzaras lach. The shami was not the tzaras erva, meaning they were not goyrus the whole halacha of tzaras erva. They still held it was asa. Zok the Mishnah cholzu. What would be if the Yavam did chalitza to a tzaras erva? Beishamai poisel and akahuna. According to Beishamai, a tzaras erva falls liyibam. If tzaras erva falls liyibam, if somebody would do chalitza to a tzaras erva in Beishamai's world, it would be a chalitza. If it would be a chalitza, she would be a chalutza. If she's a chalutza, she wouldn't be able to marry a kohen. Beisol machshir. Beisol says, no, it's going to be kosher. It's going to be fine. What do you mean? They did chalitza. It's not a chalitza. It's a chuk of a tlula. You can't do chalitza on a woman that doesn't follow yibum. And being that Basil holds the tzaras erva doesn't follow yibum, so the chalitza is nitkan chalitza. If it's nitkan chalitza, she doesn't become a chalitza. She's not going to be asked for nisyavim. What happens if there was yibum done? Someone was miyavim the tzaras erva. Beishamai machshir. Beishamai says it's fine. He was mekayim mitzvah. Yevamos yoyela. He did something gewaldig with all the sidus of the Ramban in Parashas Vayeshev. Basil Poislim. Basil says he was boil a chayve krisos, which means what? What does poisl mean? Rashi says it means that she's now considered a zoina, and as a result, she'll never be able to marry a kohen. Meaning, this is mamash a bilas nos. It's not the Mishnah. Even though what emerges then is that you see that Beishamai and Basil had a very different worldview in terms of who's an isha ksher, who's an isha psula. Right? If you do chalitza according to Beishamai, she's a psula. If you do chalitza with a tzaras erva. If you do yibum according to Beishamai, she's a ksher. According to Beis Hillel, if you do chalitza with the tzaras erva, she's not going to become a psula. If you do yibum, she's going to be a zayna. What if they went ahead and did yibum and then had a child? The child's going to be a mamzer. So you would think then that mamish Beishamai's world, Beis Hillel's world, it's not only a gay, a different halachas like a beish and all the beyontiv, right? If you mamish have halachas over here, mamzerim drink sich in the gas in the shtetl of Beishamai, that according to Beis Hillel would be Rabbeinu Shalayla. Says the Mishnah something fascinating, which is going to launch the very light dafin that we're going to have. Nimnu Beishamai milisa nashim Beis Hillel, v'loy Beis Hillel mi Beishamai. Meaning, you would have thought that maybe Beishamai Beis Hillel, when it came to a shidduch, so the first thing you'd have to put on your resume, I'm from Beishamai, I'm from Beis Hillel, right? You think it's a very, very big nafkamina. The Mishnah says no, it was fine. It was fine. Now Rashi's looking, it was fine. How can it be fine? What's Pashup Shah? What's the Beis Hillel's going to do a shidduch with someone from Beishamai? How do you know you're not marrying a mamzer? Beis Hillel's world's a mamzer. So the teretz is they would notify them, meaning they didn't make a gzeira and archaka to say that being that our worlds are so different, so I'm not even going to trust you. No. You would have to be moidia, you would have to notify, but as long as they notified, that in and of itself would be okay. Mishnah says in a similar vein, so many nafkamidas in the world of tumah of time between Beishamai and Beis Hillel, they would lend each other kalim, and they would eat with each other. There was shalom and ahava, v'achva, v'reis, as we're going to see in the Gemara. These were not things that they refrained from. Again, only if they notified them. They didn't notify them. It's not a hefkana, avada, but at the same time, they tried as much as possible to be able to get along. They tried as much as possible not to create agudos, as again, we're going to see in the Gemaras that we're about to learn. We're stopping a little bit short, but we have to speak out some Reid. If not today, then it's going to be over Zman and Batal Karbana. Just one festa ha'ara, one foundational ha'ara, as it relates to today's daf and yesterday's daf, and really everything that we've been learning since the beginning of the Masechta. So just a little bit of an introduction as it relates to the ha'ara. And that is, there's one kasha that in the lumdis of Yevamos underpins much of the Reid. That is what Kiveda's kasha that we spoke at in the end of Daf Ches. The Gemara on Daf Gimel Amud Beis brought a brisa. How do you know that an erva that falls the yibum is patam and a chalitza and a yibum? How do you know that a tzaras erva that falls the yibum is patam and a chalitza and a yibum? And how do you know that a tzaras erva that falls the yibum is patam and a chalitza and a yibum? And it was all learned out from drashas. How do you know that an erva that falls the yibum is patam and a chalitza and a yibum? It says Oleh on the parsha of Yibum, Yevamos Yovei Oleh. It says Oleh by the parsha of Achlis Isha, Isha Lachoitza Loisikach Litzra, the Galers Ervasa Oleh Bechayeh. And we learn from there that there's an Isser Eishes Ach, even b'makom Yevamos Yovei Oleh. How do you know Tzaras Erva? Because it says in that word Litzra is Miloshen Tzara, and it teaches me that b'makom Oleh, b'makom Yevamos Yovei Oleh, there's a halach of Tzaras Erva. How do you know Tzaras Erva? So the Gemara said, I know Tzaras Erva from the fact that the Torah didn't simply say Lotzur, it said Litzra. The extra Reish teaches me that not only is there a halacha of a Tzaras Erva, but there's also a halacha of a Tzaras Erva. He says, I don't understand, why did the Brisa need a Makar to tell me that a Tzaras Erva is Pater min HaChalitza min HaYibum? Once I know that a tzaras erva is pater min hachalitza min hayibum, then by definition I should know that a tzaras erva is also pater min hachalitza min hayibum. Why? Because if there's no yibum and chalitza by a tzaras erva, that means the iser Eishes ach that every single Yevama has that becomes mutter because of the fact that there's a mitzvah's yibum and a mitzvah's chalitza. In the case of the tzaras erva, never became mutter. Because she never had a mitzvah of Yevamos Yovei Oleh. She never had a mitzvah of Koche Yosel Ish Ashel Yivnes Beis. Right? There was no Yibam, there was no Chalitza. In the vernacular, there was no Zika to be matter the Isser Eishes Ach. So if that's the case, she remains an Eishes Ach. Sheloi b'makom mitzvah, which is a regular erva, like any other erva. If that's the case, even when she falls the Yibam for the second time, she's an erva. If she's an erva, her tzara is a tzaras erva. So, Freit Reb Kiva Eger, once I know the halacha of tzaras erva, I know the halacha of tzaras erva. Because if a tzaras erva is patam and a chalitza min hayibum, that means she retains her iser Eishes ach. An Eishes ach is an erva. So when this Eishes ach, this erva now falls the yibum, her tzara is going to be a regular tzaras erva. So without creating an institution called Tzaras Erva, I would anyways know that there's something called a Tzaras Erva. And if that's the case, Freit Reb Kiva Eger, I understand why I need a pasuk to tell me Erva. I understand why I need a pasuk to teach me Tzaras Erva. That's a Chiddush Nifla that you only have in Yevamos. But why do I need a pasuk to teach me Tzaras Erva? L'chura, once I know the halacha of Tzaras Erva, then by definition, I would know the halacha of tzaras erva. To add to the kasha, Kiveger said that on Daf Ches we learned that there's another shita satanon who learned the halacha of erva and tzaras erva from a different makar, not from the parsha of Achlis Isha, not from the Isha Lachoitza Loisikach Litzra, the Galers Ervasa Oleh Bechayeh, but rather he learned it from the parsha of Yibum itself. That kind of was Rebbe. And Rebbe said, it says in the Torah, L'kocha, with a mapikeh, v'yidma, with a mapikeh. It's coming to teach me the halacha of erva and tzaras erva, whatever the drush is. But Rebbe learned the halacha of erva and tzaras erva from the fact that it says, L'kocha loy v'isha v'yidma. It's from there that I know that an erva doesn't fall a yibum. It's from there that I know that a tzaras erva doesn't fall a yibum. Now Rashi, on Daf Ches Amud Beis said that Rebbe, you brought him a car that there's no yibum by an erva. You brought him a car that there's no yibum by a tzaras erva. But what's the makar that there's no yibum by a tzaras erva? It's up Rashi, asvara. He said it's pasha. Once I know that there's no yibum by a tzaras erva, I don't need a makar to tell me that there's no yibum by a tzaras erva. Because every tzaras erva is a tzaras erva. If the tzaras erva has no yibum b'chalitza, if there's no zika, there was nothing that was ever matter the Eishes ach. If that's the case, she's an Eishes ach in the nefila shniya. An Eishes ach is doch an erva. If that's the case, she's a pater tzara, just like an achas is a pater tzara. So Rashi already said that the reason that according to Rebbe, there is no makar to tzaras erva And the reason is Val Ichtaf Neshama Namakar. So Freit Reb Kiva Eiger, just like Rashi said that according to Rebbe, you don't need a Makar to Tzaras Erva. Because once I know Tzaras Erva, every Tzaras Erva is Dochat Tzaras Erva. So why the Brisa on Daf Gimel Amud Beis, the Brisa of Litzra, why doesn't need a Makar to teach me the halach of Tzaras Erva? L'chayre, every Tzaras Erva is really a Tzaras Erva. That's Reb Kiva Eiger's kasha, and Reb Kiva Eiger applied Tzarachi. So there's one thing before we even start that we need to be makdim, and that is we just learned the Gemara in Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. With the Gemara seemed at first glance to mamish ask Reb Kiva Eiger's kasha. Right? The Gemara said, very, very short Gemara, a Gemara that gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. The Gemara said, Keitzad Poitros Sorei saying b'chulu. And Rashi says, what does it mean, Keitzad Poitros Sorei saying? How do you know? And the Gemara says, Minani immediately. How do you know that? So Rashi, what does it mean, Minani immediately? How do you know that Tzaras Sarasa Patur? Gemara asks, how do you know Tzaras Saras Patur? Rabbi Yehuda said that my pasuk says Litzra. HaTorah ripsa Tzaras Harba. Learned that from Litzra. In other words, the Bryce and Daf Gimel Amud Beis. Rav Ashi said, Svari, it's a Svar. Tzara, my time Nasir. Why is it Tzara Serva? Also the B'makam Arakan. Because she's a Tzara Serva. No, Tzara Nabi B'makam Arakan. Every Tzara is really a Tzara Serva. So you have to wait until Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph to find out that Rav Ashi asked Reb Kiva Eiger's kasha. Is that true? Now, if Rav Ashi is saying Reb Kiva Eiger's Svara, it's not the end of the world. Because Reb Kiva Eiger is still asking a kasha. He's asking that Rav Ashi is so pashut that why is it Rav Ashi and Rav Yehuda, and why do we not become acquainted with Rav Ashi until the end of the sugya and Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph? It doesn't completely knock out Reb Kiva Eiger's kasha. But the Gedolei Rosh Yeshivas, all time at Ish Echad B'Leiv Echad, as Kenet Zayin that Reb Kiva Eiger's kasha is Rav Ashi's svara. You know why? Because Reb Kiva Eiger didn't quote Rav Ashi. If Reb Kiva Eiger's kasha was Rav Ashi, he would have quoted Rav Ashi. What did Reb Kiva Eiger quote? Rashi, not Rav Ashi. Rashi on Daf Amud Beis. He said that Rashi already spoke out my svara when Rashi was being Masber Rebbe. Rav Kiva Eiger said, I'm not being Mechadish a svara. I'm just telling you what Rashi already spoke out when he was being Masber Shittas Rebbe. Rav Kiva Eiger wollte das sagen asach besser. Rav Kiva Eiger wollte das sagen it's Shittas Rav Ashi. And if that's the case, what's Pshat in Rav Yehuda? What's Pshat in this? What's Pshat in that? There's all the kasha. Other Reb Kiva Eiger, where every single word of Reb Kiva Eiger is gold. If he didn't quote Rav Ashi, that means Reb Kiva Eiger never had a havamina to say Rav Ashi's svar. And the emes is, if you think about it, it's not what Rav Ashi is saying. Because Rav Ashi says what? It's so subtle, but it's gewaldig. Rav Ashi said svarahi. It's a svara. Kiva Eiger is not asking a kasha from svara. Rav Kiva Eiger is saying to the Zelbe Zach. Is that svara? What's a svara? Right, the Gemara sometimes will say, Lama likra svarahu. Why do I need a pasuk to tell me? It's a svara. Right, why do I need a pasuk to tell me that you're supposed to make a bracha before you eat? That's a svara that you make a bracha before you eat. A svara is like chazak. A svara means, I'm saying a svara. What's a svara? You start throwing your thumbs all over the place, you have a chakira, you start spitting. That's a svara. That's what a svara is. It's not a svara. It's it's the Zalbazach. I don't need a svara. A svara is another step. It's not a pasuk. It's not a drash. It's a svara. It's not svara. Rav Kiva Eiger held that svara sounds like it's another shlab. It's not another shlab. Rav Kiva Eiger is saying that if I know tzara serva, then I know tzara serva. Not me svara, because it is a tzara serva. Does the Gemara need to speak out every example of Tzaras Erva? No, of course not. Because once I know Tzaras Erva, Tein L'chacham V'yech Kamayim. You have a case of a Tzaras Erva, beside you're done. That's your case of Tzaras Erva. If a Tzaras Erva is really a Tzaras Erva, then I don't need a Gemara, Svara, to tell me why Tzaras Erva is awesome. Tzaras Erva is awesome because it's Tzaras Erva. It's the same thing. It's not another step. Regardless, it's muchach from Reb Kiva Eiger that Reb Kiva Eiger was not saying Rav Ashi's svara because he never made mention of Rav Ashi's svara. Why not? So that's already the income of Koimelach. But let's go back to Reb Kiva Eiger's kash. Think Reb Kiva Eiger. Why do I need litzra? Why do I need the extra resh to tell me that it's Tzaras Erva's aser? Once I know that it's Tzaras Erva's aser, the male I know that it's Tzaras Erva's aser, and not even the svara. He. L'shoinei hazav shel gedoylei achronim. So the zelbe zach. And if that's the case, I don't need a pasuk like Rav Yehuda said. I don't need a svara like Rav Ashi said. Every single tzara serva is a tzara serva. So there's many mahalchim to answer this kasha, but there's one predominant mahalch, and this mahalch requires a tiny bit of an introduction. That is Tosfos on Daf Amud Aleph. It's a long Tosfos. Asks a bomba kasha. The Mishnah mentioned Chamesh Esrei Nashim, Poitros Sareseim, Vitzoros Sareseim, and Achalitzim and Ayim. And the Mishnah listed all 15 arayas that had the ability to pat the tzara. The Gemara brought different Amoyroim that tried finding a 16th erva. Amalei Levi Rebbe. Levi told Rebbe, I have a 16th erva. Imay Anus Asavim. How come it wasn't mentioned in the Mishnah? Rebbe didn't like the question, not even a little bit. He said, but either way, Rebbe said, Imay Anus Asaviv is definitely not an erva that belongs in the Mishnah. Rish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan. He told him, I have a 16th erva that I believe could have mentioned in the Mishnah. Based on the leisasei of Kiman Shalaybana, Shavlayivna, and Rabbi Yochanan told Rish Lakish whatever he told Rish Lakish. Tosfos and Daf Amud Aleph says that I have another case. I have a 16th. Not Levi's, not Rish Lakish's. I have a 16th. This is a real Yevamos case. The case is what would happen if a man was married. He gave his wife a get. He gave his wife a get ala tanai. It was done on the condition. The condition was, Haret Megureshes, you're divorced, al tanai that you don't marry plain. You don't marry a certain person. You marry this person, then I'm pulling back the get. It's going to come out with my friend, you're an Eishes. It's not a get. The get will not be cham. Now, to machlokes tanoim, in the end of Masechtas Git, in a Perek HaMegarish, whether a man could give a get like this or not. Believe it or not, there are shittas that hold it is a kosher get. Very Tosfos, what would be if somebody divorced his wife and he said, Haret Megureshes almenas shaloitin nasi leish ploini, on the condition that you don't marry Ploini. And then she went ahead and she married Ploini's brother. And then Ploini's brother died, left over no children. She fell a you. To who? To the man that she's not allowed to marry. The man that if she marries, it's going to be, I'm afraid that the get is out. And as a result, she's now going to be an Eishes. So what's the halacha? Could he do yibum or could he not do yibum? Zokta, this is posh, he can't do yibum. She's an Eishes. Not just that, no chalitza either. Why? Because she's an Eishes. Allow. Eishes is an erva, and as a result, there'd be no yibum, no chalitza. Zokta says, if there was another wife, if Reuven, when he died, left over a tzara, the tzara would be a tzara erva. So if that's the case, for listening to Tazayin, I have a 16th erva that could have been mentioned in the Mishnah. What's the erva? Eishes. Eishes, how can Eishes fall a Yibum? Yibum means the man died, she's an almana by definition. How's it possible? Tosfos came up with a festa academic example of how it's possible that an Eishes could fall a Yibum. And if that's the case, an Eishes is an erva, it's part of the hekish of all the arayas, it's l'chore iskish lafisisha, and if that's the case, it's shapater etzara. As I say, Tosfos kasha. So Tosfos has a whole arichos, and what comes out from Tosfos arichos is that me'ezatam, ayin sham, Eishes would not have the ability to pater etzar. And for that reason, says Tosfos, it wasn't mentioned in the Mishnah. Because it's true, this woman herself, the quote-unquote Eishes will be patem in a yibum and will be patem in a chalitza. But at the same time, her tzara will not be patem in a yibum and a chalitza, and that's why it wasn't mentioned in the Mishnah. In other words, what emerges from Tosfos, this is what we need, is that there's a hechatimtza, you can have a woman who's going to fall a yibum, she's going to be an erva, so that she herself would be patem in a yibum and a chalitza. However, if there was a tzara, the tzara won't be a tzara ser. How's that possible? It's almost impossible to find such a case because it's connected the most important sugya in the whole Masechta. The teretz is this case, where the man was married to a woman that if she would marry his brother would knock out the marriage. He died. She fell now as a Yevamos. She's an Eishes to the Yavam. And like Tosfos speaks out on Davyud, this erva, for whatever reason, doesn't have the ability to pater the tzara. So she's an erva. She's pater min ha'yibum min ha'chalitza. But as it relates to the erva is not going to be pater min ha'chalitza or min ha'yibum. Rabbi Ber in Birchas Shmuel, Siman Beis, right here in Masechtas Yevamos says that his lashon is that v'hine u'mikfar hayomim. There were many, it was already showing gewesen a lange Zeit, that Sha'alti Pi Moiri V'Rabbi K'tosh Yisrael Zeichet Tzadik V'Kodesh L'Vracha. Reb Chaim. He said he once asked Reb Chaim the following question. He said it comes out from Tosfos that this Eishes ish that falls the Yibum is going to be patim in a Yibum and a Chalitza. But her tzara is not going to be patim in a Yibum and Chalitza. Why? Like Tosfos says, because Eishes ish doesn't have the ability to patim tzara, and that's why Eishes ish was mentioned in the Mishnah. Over Rabbi Beres, Reb Chaim, I hear Tosfos love this, but I don't understand Tosfos halacha. At the end of the day, if this woman, when she falls the Yibum, doesn't have a mitzvah's Yibum, because she's an Eishes ish, that means there's no Zika. If there's no Zika, there's nothing being matter her Eishesach. If there's nothing being matter her Eishesach, then the tzara should weiter be a tzara serva. Not a tzara Eishesish, that Tosfos said is not considered a tzara serva. Oh, but tzara Eishesach shloi b'makam mitzvah. And Eishesach shloi b'makam mitzvah we know has the ability to pater a tzara. Eishesach me'imai, Eishesach shloi hayo b'yolamai. So Frank Baruch Ber says, umikvar hayom shalti. He says, how long the site zurück habe ich gefragt Reb Chaim. He said, I never understood this Tosfos. He says, Tosfos says over here that the tzara of the Eishes ish is going to be a woman that you could do yibum. She's not going to be a tzara erva. Tosfos was saying it mitzad the erva of Eishes ish. Oh, but Tosfos is saying it lamaisa, halacha lamaisa. Halacha lamaisa can't be true because even if she's not a tzara erva mitzad the erva of Eishes ish, oh, but Frank Baruch Ber, she should be a tzara erva mitzad the erva of Eishes ish. So Baruch Ber said, the Reb Chaim told me a yisoid that's known in yeshiva as, quote, Eishes ach the memela. Reb Chaim told me that this Eishes ach doesn't have the ability to pater tzara. And the reason is, because the only time an erva has the ability to pater tzara is if the reason there's no yibum and chalitza is because the woman's an erva. So you have a woman, right now that falls the yibum. There should be a mitzvah yivama yavayala. She's an erva. That's why there's no yivama yavayala. What kind of erva? Any one of the 15 arayos that I mentioned in the Mishnah. Whatever the erva was. Then there's a halacha that if the erva is the siba, why there's no yibum, that erva also paters the tzar. That's the drasha of tzaras erva. But what happens if a woman falls the yibum, and the reason there's no yibum is not because she's an erva. The reason there's no yibum is for some dover study. It just so happens that because of the fact that there's no yibum, the memela, she has the Isser Shazach. Because that Isser Shazach that ordinarily would shop the Yibum, would be the Siba for the Yibum, would be Mutter b'Makom Yibum. Now all of a sudden, because there's some external reason that's saying there's no Yibum, suddenly has nothing to be matter. So the memela, you're left with an Shazach. That Shazach doesn't have the ability to pater its son. So Reb Chaim told Reb Baruch Ber that being that the Eishes ish is not able to pater at tzara. What do you want? That being that the Eishes ish never got the head to Yibum, so now she should be an Eishes ach shaloi b'makom mitzvah and let the Eishes ach pater at tzara. The Eishes ach is Eishes ach the memela. The Eishes ach is not the siba for why there's no Yibum. The Eishes ach is just here b'memela as a result of the fact that there's no Yibum. And that type of Eishes ach, that type of erva doesn't have the ability to pater at tzara. And that's what Reb Chaim told Reb Baruch Ber, that it's for that reason Tosfos said that in the case of the balas tonight, that's what it's known as, the sugya of the balas tonight. But in the case of the balas tonight, the tzara is going to be mutter. Even if she's not a tzaras erva mitzad the erva of Eishes ish, shouldn't she be considered a tzaras erva mitzad the erva of Eishes ach? The teretz is that the Eishes ach doesn't have the ability to pater at tzara. The reason is because it's an Eishes ach the memel. One of the important cases of Yevamos where there's no Yibum and Chalitza is Chayve Lavin and Chayve Lavin Basin. So we've seen it a little bit, but we just touched it. Really, it's a sugya coming up. It's a sugya on Daf Chav. The halach is that a Chayve Lavin that falls in the Yibum is Chayletzes v'loy Yevamos. A Chayve Lavin Ve'esmin that falls in the Yibum is also Chayletzes v'loy Yevamos. The Gemara asks, Akasha Chayve Lavin, why Chayletzes v'loy Yevamos? Why don't you say Asay doichalois asay? And the Gemara said, you're right. Zera bir rishon atobishim. At the end of the day, Chayve Lavin is Chayletzes v'loy Yevamos. Chayve Lavin Ve'esmin is even more pashut. Why it's Chayletzes v'loy Yevamos? There's no Asay doichalois asay when it comes to Chayve Lavin Ve'esmin, and therefore the halacha is Chayletzes v'loy Yevamos. In fact, the Gemara says there's an afkamino between a Chayve Lavin and a Chayve Lavin Ve'esmin. Chayve Lavin is Chayletzes v'loy Yevamos, but the Eved, if the Yavim does Yibum, the halacha is the Yibum Schal. In Baalu Kanu. Chayve Lavin Ve'esmin, there's no Yibum, it's Chayletzes v'loy Yevamos, and but the Eved, if he does a Yibum, it's not going to be Chal in Balu Loikan. The Mishnah Lamelech, Kler Chakir. His Chakira was a Chayve Lavin Ve'esmin, where there's no Yibum. Now is there no Yibum and Balu like Kanu, even the Yevet, there's no Yibum. Let's say the Yavam was Bala. Is he over the Isser Shesach or is he not over the Isser Shesach? This was the Mishnah Mal's Chakir. Would he be over the Isser or would he not be over the Isser? Do you say that at the end of the day she fell a Yibum? V'haraya, she needs Chalitza. So maybe the fact that she needs Chalitza, the quote-unquote Zikas Chalitza, is enough to say that there's going to be no Isser Shesach, or at the end of the day, there's no Heter Yibum. So if there's no Heter Yibum, maybe there will be an Isser Shesach. This was the Mishnah Melech's Chakir. So Rav Shlomo Hayman, in Chedusha Rav Shlomo, in Siman Aleph, so he says that he saw a kasha that somebody asked that according to the Mishnah Melech Tzad, that every Chayvi Lavim Ve'esen, being that there's no Heter Yibum, so there's going to be an Isser Shesach. The Heter Shesach of every Yibum comes as a result of the fact that there's a mitzvah Yibum, or at the very least as a result of the fact that b'di'evet the Yibum is a Yibum. But Chayv Hilav the Essen where there's no mitzvah Yibum. Not just that in Balu like Kanu. The halacha is that maybe there's an Isser Shesach. So Shlomo Hayman said, I saw Shiloh. If that's the case, every tzaras Chayv Hilav the Essen should be a tzaras erva. Should be a tzaras erva. Shaloi b'makom mitzvah. Because if there's an Isser Shesach, so it comes out she's an Shesach. If she's an Eishesach, so the tzaras chayvi lavin essen is the chatzaras Eishesach. So if she's a tzaras Eishesach, so why is there no halacha related to a tzaras chayvi lavin essen? No one ever heard of a din regarding a tzaras chayvi lavin essen. She's mutter. Why is she mutter? She's a tzaras erva. Which erva? Eishesach. Where's the Eishesach? Because if there's no het yibum, that means that was one sign of Mishnah Melech that there's going to be an Isser Eishesach. So let the Eishesach part of the tzara. Zogen dachroinim. It's an Eishesach to Memela. It's true there's an Eishesach. But the reason there's no Yibum is not because of the Eishesach. The reason there's no Yibum is because she's an Alman of the Kohen Gadol. Because there's a Chayv Lav Essen. Because of the fact that there's no Yibum, B'Memela, there's an Isser Eishesach. That Eishesach doesn't Reb Chaim's Yisrael. That Eishesach doesn't have the ability to pater the tzara. This is the basic halacha of Eishesach to Memela. So before we take it to the next step, we just have to speak out one thing. That is, there's one at first glance, tremendous ha'ara on Eishesach Memela. That is a Gemara that we learned yesterday. The Gemara related to the Tzaras Islandess. An islandess, the halacha is, but Rav Asti said that an islandess, just like she's potter from Yibum Mechalitza, that's not a Machlokes Amayram, that everybody agrees. The halacha is that her tzara is going to be Yasser as well. And Rashi says, why would her tzara be Yasser? The reason is because being that the islandess is mufka from Yibum, so it comes out she never had the Heter Shesach. So if she never had the Heter Shesach, so it comes out her tzara is going to end up being a tzaras islandess. It's going to end up being a tzaras Shesach Shloi B'Makom Mitzvah, which is a tzaras erva. So l'chura, what do you mean? That's an Eishesach to Memela 101. What's the difference between the tzaras Eishesach Shloi B'Makom Mitzvah of tzaras islandess versus the tzaras Balas Tanai of Reb Chaim Toisus Yevamos Amud Aleph, or the tzaras Chayvi Lavin Ve'esen, Rav Shlomo Hayman's kasha that he found in a sefer on the side of the Mishnah Melech, that every Chayvi Lavin Ve'esen has an Eishesach. If the word is that the only time an erva has the ability to pater a tzara is when the erva is the siva that there's no yibum, but the Eishesach, which is the erva that the Torah was matter in yibum, that Eishesach doesn't have the ability to pater a tzara, so Maishna tzaras islandess. Why would tzaras islandess be any different? So that is a lot to talk about. Again, we're scratching the surface here. There's a lot to talk about, but just kedai to speak out one dover poshet adam oed. That is from the sefer Imrei Moshe. Imrei Moshe was a Talmud Muvik of Reb Chaim, and the Reb Moshe in Siman Zayin, he starts off the Siman with Reb Chaim's Yisoid. Just listen to the first line. Kvar mefursim b'shem Moiri v'Rabbi Agoyin Reb Chaim Zatzal. The Yisoid of Eishesach Memela, and he has a whole Siman where he talks about Eishesach Memela. And in Sivkot and Gimel, he asks this kasha, b'chayr kasha, I Eishes ach min afila harishoyna, eina peiteres sarasa. So what's pshat in the mandama that holds Saras Island is petura? Al karchach mishum Eishes ach peiteres sarasa. So if that's the case, how does it show with Reb Chaim's Yisrael of Eishes ach memela? So the Reb Moshe says a very pashto mahalach. He says that Yesh Shloimer, the emissaries in the Gemara, it's Mavur, was a Machlekes Amiran, where the Tzaras Islandess is Asura, Tzaras Islandess is Muteres. Rava said that Tzaras Islandess is Muteres. So he says, Yesh Shloimer, Rava Taka held Tzaras Islandess Muteres, precisely because Eishes Achtem Amela. We pass in Saras Eilamis Muteris, not like Ravasi, like Rava. So the fear MS, it's true, it works, Eishes Achtem Amela. I Ravasi, the Moshe, who was a Talmud Muvagar Reb Chaim, he held it's very hard to stem Ravasi's Saras Eilamis Asura with Reb Chaim's Yusai. Abikiyadua, the Achroinim, and all the Rashivas have Mahalchim. But the bottom line is a Posh the Mahalach Posh in case we can't go weiter without addressing Saras Eilamis. That's the Teretz of Saras Eilamis. And just to be clear, Saras Soita is not fair, right? Why is Saras Soita not a Eishes Achtem Amela? Because then the Soita is the Erva. She is the Erva. Tumik Sibakarai. Saras Machzir Gushasai. The Machzir Gushasai is the Erva. So you have to work through all the cases. But the one glaring one is going to be Saras Eilamis. Eilamis is not an Erva. It's the Eishes Achshalai B'Makam Mitzvah. So I hear the easy way out, and again, it's from the Talmud Muvik, the grace of Talmud Reb Chaim, Dimrei Moshe, is an Erechinami. Rav Asi Taka didn't hold the Eishes Achtem Amela. The whole Eishes Achtem Amela is all in Rava, who argued with Rav Asi, who hold that Saras Eilamis is mutar. But here's the bottom line. The bottom line is we have Reb Chaim's Yisoid. Reb Chaim's Yisoid of Eishes Achtem Amela. This is Ogen Dachroinim. It's Ogen Dachroinim. It's Lafiza Yesh Loimar, a Yishuv Hogun, V'nochoin, L'kushis Reb Kiveger. Kiveger is the kasha that why do I need Litzra? Teach me Tzara Sara. Why do I need Rav Ashi Svara on Afil Gimel Amud Aleph to teach me the halacha of Tzara Sara? Every Tzara Sara is a Tzaras Erva. Why should it Tzaras Erva? Because the Tzaras Erva is doch an Eishes Achshaloi B'Makam Mitzvah. And if the Tzaras Erva is an Eishes Achshaloi B'Makam Mitzvah, so the Tzaras Tzara is doch a Tzaras Erva. She's a Tzara of the Tzaras Erva. Meaning, if the Tzaras Erva doesn't have a Heter Yibum, then her Tzara can't even have a Heter B'Makam Yibum. Because once the Tzaras Erva doesn't have a Heter B'Makam Yibum, she has an Isrei Shazach. And if she has an Isrei Shazach, so by definition, her Tzara is going to end up being the Tzaras Erva. The teretz is, it's an Eishes Achtem Amela. Because really, the Tzaras Erva would have a Heter Yibum mitzad the Isrei Shazach. It's just because she's a Tzaras Erva that she can't have the Heter Yibum. So now that there's no Heter Yibum, you want to use the Eish Shazach that comes about b'Memela and let that pater Tzara al Zen Nemar Eish Shazach b'Memela. And it's for that reason, say the Achroinim, the L'chayra, Miken Zogin, Reb Chaim's Yisoid, Miyashiv to sein, Reb Kiveger's Kasha. But the emes is, it's not pashut at all. It's not pashut at all. This is going to take us just one step deeper in terms of getting into the lumdus a little bit, and we're going to stop it here. But just one little more. And that is, what was Reb Kiveger's Kasha? Kiveger's Kasha was what? A pasuk for Tzaras Sara. Typically, every Tzaras Sara is really a Tzaras Erva. So let's just visualize again the case of a Tzaras Sara, because it's very, very important, and certainly important understanding this nuance in lumdus. A Tzaras Sara is where there was Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven was married to two wives. One of them was a Tzara, one of them was an Erva to Shimon, and the other one was not an Erva to Shimon. Reuven died, he left over no children. Shimon and Levi now have a mitzvah of Yibum. Shimon can't do Yibum because one of Reuven's wives was an Erva, the other wife is then a Tzaras Erva. As a result, he has no mitzvah Yibum. Levi, however, is allowed to do Yibum. Shimon's Erva Tzaras Erva only affects Shimon, doesn't affect the other, but doesn't affect Levi. So Levi went ahead and Levi did Yibum. He could have done Yibum with the Erva. He could have done it with the Tzaras Erva. He chose to do it with the Tzaras Erva. So Levi is now married to the original Tzaras Erva. Levi had another wife. Levi died, he had no children. So that Levi's two wives now fall the Yibum to Shimon. The one wife is the wife that was a Tzaras Erva from Reuven. And then the other wife was just Levi's wife. Al Zen Nemar, that Shimon can't do Yibum and doesn't even have an obligation to do chalitza with the Tzaras Erva. Not just that, also with the other wife, because she's the Tzara of the Tzaras Erva. Tzaras Erva. Now, we spoke out, when we spoke about Kiveger's Kasha, that really, it's a little bit of a chiddush, this whole idea of Tzaras Erva. The reason it's a little bit of a chiddush is because the Tzaras Erva was a Tzaras Erva in the Nefila Rishayna, when Reuven died. But now, when Levi died, she's not a Tzaras Erva anymore. Tzaras Erva, that was back then. What shaykh is? Now she's still a Tzaras Erva. The Tzaras Erva, where's she a Tzaras Erva? Reuven was married to Shimon's Erva and to this woman that made her into a Tzaras Erva. But Levi was never married to the Erva. So why does she retain her status of Tzaras Erva? The teretz is because it's halacha called Nesra. The Gemara says that once the Yevamos is asa for shah achas Nesra Yevamos, she becomes asa forever. So really, right now, Levi is married to the woman that was the Tzaras Erva to Shimon,
And even though she's not a tzaras erva anymore, but still she's osir to Shimon because she was a tzaras erva in the nefila rishayna, and she then became osir. There was no heter for her Eishes. And once she's osir sha'achas, she's nestra ilamnes, so she still carries with her that iser Eishes. And it's for that reason now in the nefila shniya, there's mokim to say that the other wife is a tzaras erva. If there was no halach of nesra, then we're not having this conversation. Because you would say, okay, the nefila rishayna, but that's bygones. The teretz says nesra. Once she became aser in the nefila rishayna, so now in the nefila shniya, she carries with her this iser. And being that she carries with her this iser, it's for that reason her tzara is going to be a tzara sa. So let me ask you a question. If they get a kasha, then why do I need a pasuk of tzaras? Tzara. L'chayra, tzaras erva. Throwing in a tzar. Why do I need a pasuk for tzaras erva? Typically, that every tzaras erva is really a tzaras erva. Was Reb Kiva Eger's kasha that the tzaras erva should be a tzaras erva machmas the iser Eishes ach of the nefila shniya, or was Reb Kiva Eger's kasha that the tzaras erva should be a tzaras erva machmas the iser Eishes ach of the nefila rishayna? L'chayra, Reb Kiva Eger's kasha was that even if you want to tell me that you can't dan the tzaras erva as a tzaras erva machmas the Eishes ach in the nefila shniya, but still she's going to be a tzaras erva machmas the iser Eishes ach of the nefila rishayna. And if that's the case, it's posh that she should be considered a tzaras erva. And Eishes Achtem Memela is not going to help me. What's Eishes Achtem Memela? Eishes Achtem Memela means Levi just died. Okay, left over two Yevamos. One Yevama is the original Tzaras Erva, and the other Yevama is just the Yevam. L'chayra, the original Tzaras Erva should have had a Heter Yibum. She doesn't have a Heter Yibum because she's a Tzaras Erva. If that's the case, it triggers an Eishes Ach. If it triggers an Eishes Ach, let the Eishes Ach pater. That kasha, the teretz is pashut. That kasha is the Eishes Achtem Memela. The Isra Eishes Ach Yibam is really matter. You want to tell me because Yibam can't be matter, so therefore that Eishes Ach shapater etzara? Al zeh nemar. It's regarding that we say Eishes Ach Memela. Das is Reb Chaim's Yisoid. That was never Reb Kivega's kasha. Kivega knew Reb Chaim's Yisoid. He knew Pshat and Toys for Yor. He knew the teretz to the kasha Shlomo Haim brings. He knew all the rate that comes from Eishes Ach Memela. Kivega was asking something else. Kivega was asking that being that this woman was also Eishes Ruven, and Eishes Ruven is Oichet Eishes Achiv Shel Shimon. And when she was Eishes Ruven, there was never a heter to do Yibam v'Chalitza, and there's a halacha called Nesra, so she maintained her halacha of being an Eishes Achiv Ruven. The Eishes Achiv Ruven is not an Eishes Achtem Memela. The Eishes Achiv Levi is Eishes Achtem Memela. Oh, but the Eishes Achiv Ruven is not Eishes Achtem Memela. What's Eishes Achtem Memela? The Eishes Ach that this Yibam could be matter can't pater a tzara. Kivega knows that. He doesn't want that Eishes Ach to pater the tzara. Kivega's time is let the Eishes Ach of Reuben pater the tzara. That Eishes Ach of Reuben, this Yibum can't be matter. When Levi dies, Levi's Misa is matter, Levi's Eishes Ach. But it can't be matter, Reuben's Eishes Ach. And this Yevama had in the Nefila Rishayna. That's how she became a Tzaras Erva. And in the Nefila Rishayna, she never had a Heter Eishes Ach. And it's Nesroi Lama, so she's walking around with this Isra Eishes Ach. So when this woman falls the Yibum right now to Shimon, she's an Eishes Ach times two. She's an Eishes Ach mitzad the Eishes Reuven, she's an Eishes Ach mitzad Eishes Levi. Now you tell me, who cares? Why does that matter? You know why it matters? Because Eishes Ach of Levi is Eishes Ach to Memela. That can't pater a tzara. Aber Eishes Ach of Reuven is not Eishes Ach to Memela. And that Eishes Ach would be able to pater tzara. So if that's the case, Zok Rav Shmuel Yaakov and Zoisle Yaakov and Zog and Andre Gedoyle Achroinim, that it's poshut why Reb Kiva Eger didn't simply say Eishes Ach to Memela. Kiva Eger knew the side of Eishes Ach to Memela. But Reb Kiva Eger held Eishes Ach to Memela is only going to help me for the current Eishes Ach. The Eishes Ach that this Yibum is supposed to be matter, which it can't be matter because of some reason. And as a result, the Memela having this Eishes Ach, that Eishes Ach can't matter itzar. That's the halacha of Eishes Ach to Memela. And Reb Kiva Eger was never asking that let the Isser Eishes Ach of Eishes Levi pater itzar, even though it's there. But he knows that's not a kasha because Reb Kiva Eger knew Eishes Ach to Memela. Kiva Eger's kasha was that you also have Eishes Ruven.
Because where did that Isser Eishes Ach go? The only thing that could have been matter was Yibum, and Yibum was never mattered. And because Yibum was never mattered, so that Isser Eishes Ach is still there. That Isser Eishes Ach is coming from a Friedig in the Suin. That Isser Eishes Ach, this Yibum was never mattered. That's a regular Isser Eishes Ach. It's a prosta Erva, like any other Erva in the world. And if that's the case, for Kivega, let that Erva be mattered. Pasha. That was what Kvega's Kasha. Kvega's Kasha was never Eishes Levi should be matter. Rabbi Kvega's Kasha was that Eishes Ruvain should be matter. And if it's Eishes Ruvain, Eishes Achta V'Meila is not going to help you. So what do the Lumdim say? So the Lumdim start saying that it could be that being that there's a shaykhis between Eishes Ruvain and Eishes Levi, there's some continuation of the original marriage. So if in Eishes Levi it's Eishes Achta V'Meila, then in Eishes Ruvain it also has to be Eishes Achta V'Meila. This is already some super duper Lumdis, and we will stop here.